Today we are going to lick. We're going to lick nothing. Okay? My heart is in the right place. What is it that makes people listen when someone speaks? Is it mainly the tone of their voice? Like, is it a naturally beautiful sounding voice, a pleasant voice to listen to? I guess that is one of the main things, or the first things that we will notice. However, I've heard many people speak who don't maybe have a naturally beautiful voice to listen to, but I've heard some of those people communicate very effectively. It was nice to listen to them. It was easy to stay engaged in their story, their instruction, their communication. The topic of speaking well is, of course, very complex. There are so many variables, settings, and scenarios that will affect how we talk about how we talk. But in today's video of Voice Matters, I would just like to touch on a few basic concepts in terms of how we use our voice for more effective speaking. Firstly, it doesn't matter what the tone color of your voice is. Whether you have a voice that's naturally a bit higher pitched, maybe tending to be a little bit nasal, or whatever the case may be, anyone can learn to speak better. Whether we are in an interpersonal conversation, whether we address a boardroom full of colleagues, teach a class, or even sit around the dinner table in an informal chat with our friends, we can learn to become more aware of our voice and how we use our voice to communicate more effectively. Now, I should mention that these videos that I'm creating are really intended for people who want to better themselves. And I know that's why you are here, because you are the kind of person who want to be intentional about developing yourself as a whole, as a complete person. So let's dive right in. So today we are going to look at 5 things: pitch, tempo, dynamics, breath, pitch, tempo, dynamics, and lastly, body and facial expression. So firstly, breath. Air is energy. If you want your sound to be energized, if you want to produce a good quality sound, you can't do it without having enough breath in your system. The implication of what I'm saying is that we must think about our breathing. This is especially true when you are teaching or instructing someone, whether it's a group or an individual, but it actually applies to all forms of verbal communication. This is more a mindset, a new way of thinking, rather than a physical or physiological thing. So what I mean by that is that in this context, we are not going to be overly concerned or focus on or talk about the functionality of the diaphragm, the lungs, and all of that. Let me illustrate by reading a sentence in 2 different ways. The first time, I'm not going to be intentional about my breathing, and then the second time, I will be. This is the sentence. Hi Stephen, nice to see you. I would like you to please start on those reports we spoke about yesterday. You know, the ones concerning Mr. Smith's case. He is a very important client to our company, and we need to stay on top of this inquiry on a daily basis. If you have any questions, just speak to Karen. So that's a normal, regular kind of sentence that a boss would maybe say to one of his employees. So now I'm going to say it again. I'm going to be very intentional with taking time to breathe. So listen to this. Hi Stephen, nice to see you. I would like you to please start on those reports we spoke about yesterday. You know, the ones concerning Mr. Smith's case. He is a very important client to our company, and we need to stay on top of this inquiry on a daily basis. If you have any questions, just speak to Karen. Right, so obviously I'm exaggerating it a little bit, but it makes a huge difference when I think about creating space for breathing. That also gives some ebb and flow to my sentence. Just because there are some pauses where I actually think about the inhale, my sound quality improves, and I think Stephen would have been more likely to listen to what I said. The second one is pitch. So varying the pitch, which is the high and the low of sound, right, with intentionality is actually very important. Have you ever listened to someone who just mainly speaks on one pitch almost all the time? It's very difficult to stay connected to what they're saying and really get what they're trying to communicate. Actually, sometimes people just tune out because it's just too monotonous. So choosing certain phrases or certain words to go either a little bit higher or a little bit lower in pitch can change everything. Again, let me do another sentence. I'm going to read it in two different ways. Jonathan, what a surprise to see you here today, of all people. How's your dad doing? We were all so concerned when we heard about his health issue. I truly admire that man so much. No one can ever know the massive effect he had on my life. Please be sure to send him and your mother all our love and best wishes. Okay. Now, with intentional pitch changes. Jonathan, what a surprise to see you here today, of all people. How's your dad doing? We were all so concerned when we heard about his health issue. I truly admire that man so much. No one can ever know the massive effect he had on my life. Please be sure to send him and your mother all our love and our best wishes. Right? So just a bit of intentionality with the pitch. It doesn't have to be extremely high and extremely low. Just varying it just makes it so much more interesting to listen to, so much more engaging. All right, next up is tempo. The rhythms and the tempo of our speech is very important. Again, if your tempo stays more or less the same throughout your whole sentence or your whole conversation, it's going to become monotonous. It's going to become boring. It's going to be difficult for people to stay engaged and actually get the message. Now, even though there's a lot to say about rhythms in speech, today we're just going to focus on tempo. So here's another example. Today is a very special day as we are going to discuss the year-end awards ceremony. Now, it doesn't matter whether you have 2, 5 or 30 members to assess. The important thing is that you are extremely vigilant in sticking to the assessment criteria. Consistency is the goal. Right. Very boring. Now let me try and vary my tempo. Today is a very special day, as we are going to discuss the year-end awards ceremony. Now, it doesn't matter whether you have 2, 5, or 30 team members to assess. The important thing is that you are extremely vigilant in using the assessment criteria. Consistency is the goal. Right? So I know that sounds a bit overly animated, but you get the point. Varying the tempo, making some words longer, pausing before I go on, and then other words that follow on really quickly, just makes it interesting to listen to. And I'm sure that people would have listened and got my point. Right, number 4 is dynamics. Now, dynamics refers to loudness or volume, right? In technical terms, for the voice, of course, what that means is increased or decreased airflow. But like I said earlier, today we're not going to focus on the physiological or the technical reason for things. We're more going to focus on the effect that we are after. The issue of volume can be a tricky one. Some of us naturally have bigger voices and other people have smaller voices. Now what that basically means is someone with a bigger voice doesn't have to work as hard to produce more volume, whereas someone with a smaller voice does. Now people with big voices have to be careful because they can easily come across as strict, hard, angry, even bombastic when they're not even trying to do that at all. And on the flip side of that, someone with a small voice should be very intentional about working on varying their dynamics or their volume. Otherwise, again, the listener might just not engage, tune out, and not get the message. So here's a little example of how I can change the So here's an example of how varying the dynamics, I can totally change the effectiveness of my communication. Listen to this sentence. Oh no, Matthew, have you really gone and made a mud bath again? Listen, I have spent way too much of my time and energy to explain this to you in the past. You cannot leave the sprinkler on right in front of the entrance for 2 hours. Our visitors will arrive in less than half an hour. You have 20 minutes to clean up this mess. Very monotonous, right? Okay, now I'm going to vary the dynamics, the volume. Oh no, Matthew! Have you really gone and made a mud bath again? Listen, I have spent way too much time and energy to explain this to you in the past. You cannot leave the sprinkler on right in front of the entrance for 2 hours. Our visitors will arrive in less than half an hour. So you have 20 minutes to clean up this mess. Yeah? Did you feel that a little bit more? I think so. I think it's important to mention though that staying on a high dynamic or a high volume for the biggest part or the whole speech that we give often has the opposite effect. Even if I have good reason, let's say, to be angry or upset, if I stay at a level 10 all throughout what I'm trying to say, then many times my listener will also just shut down, tune out, and actually not hear what I'm saying. So finally then, facial expression. Well, and body language, facial and bodily expression. Now this obviously has nothing to do with the voice, right? With the sound that we make. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. I just want to make this point. If you and I become more aware of what we do with our voice when we communicate, if we pay attention to pitch, to tempo, if we take time to breathe and all the stuff that we've talked about today, then our face is more likely to come along for the ride. I mean, this should be a very organic thing, right? We don't want to plan certain facial expressions all the time. We want it to just follow the effectiveness of our communication. I want you to remember this. People hear what they see. So if the words that I use and the sound of my voice is not matched by what's happening on my face and in my body language, then I'm far less likely to get my point across. In conclusion, let me say this. We hardly ever use any one of these elements of sound in isolation. Just altering the pitch or changing the tempo or merely playing with the volume is not really going to have the desired effect, but a combination of all these different things. The point is, the more you and I become aware of and become intentional about using these different elements of sound, the more likely our face and our body is to join in, and all our communication overall in various different settings will become much more effective. So this was just a very brief look at a few basic elements, right, of sound in speaking. If you liked it, if you found it helpful, and you would like to hear more, why don't you let me know in the comments? Say, Johan, I'd love it if you spoke more about this or that element of sound or communication. I would love to hear from you because there is a lot more to talk about. My challenge to you for the next week is simply this. Try to take one of these elements and focus on it for one day. In other words, for one day, maybe try to just focus on, am I altering my pitch a little bit in my speech? And the next day, maybe focus on, can I change the tempo throughout my sentences when I speak to someone? And the following day, you focus on varying the dynamics. Just that whole day, listen out for it. See if you can become more aware and a bit more intentional on that one thing. This is not something that's going to change overnight, right? I've been living for almost 5 decades, and I've been focusing on voice, people's voices, my own voice for all these years. So I'm much more aware and much more intentional habitually. I don't have to think about it anymore, but you might have to start. Just take one thing at a time, try it, and see what the effect is that it has on the people that you communicate with. So my name is Johan Bester. Thank you so much for spending the time with me today. And always remember that your voice matters.